How's it going, guys? I did it. I bought the Xbox Ally X. XX edition. XXXXXXX. Yeah, the name of this thing is kind of convoluted, but what it does isn't. And I wanted to talk to you about my first impressions with it, because as someone who proudly owns a Switch 2, had the original Ally, and a Steam Deck, I have some thoughts. And they're mostly positive, but there is some of the things mixed in there, mainly because of the price of it. So let's get right into it. Hello and welcome. My name is Wolfy. You're watching Lesser Than Cake, the channel where I talk about video games while inside of a video game. And today we're talking about the Xbox Ally X. Now, for those of you who don't know, I talked about this one on the channel and got weirdly ratioed because I was blunt about the price and blunt about everything and wasn't buying into the direct hype. And guess what? Just to talk about it, I was right. The Xbox Ally X came in at $1,000. What I was wrong on was the processor, because I thought they were going to go with the Strix Halo processor. They did not. They went with the Z2 Extreme, which is based off of a refined version of the Z1 Extreme, and there are some major improvements there. The Z1 Extreme wasn't really that efficient. The Z2 Extreme, though, is efficient. In fact, it got to the point that I could actually play the handheld away from the wall, which I know, great for a handheld to do, but it wasn't always a given with the original Ally. I do play gacha games a lot, and yes, you can play them on your phone, but you know, a full-powered PC makes Honkai Star Rail look amazing, where a good phone will be playing it at like 30-ish frames per second. Digressing. Being able to play games at 60 frames per second, 1080p, on the go, is actually really nice. And it seems to work pretty well with most medium to high detailed AAA games. There are some exceptions to that, and that seems to be entirely on games with like ray tracing and stuff like that. But general performance is actually really, really good on this thing, and really good on battery. You see, the Xbox Ally X is still a PC at heart. Granted, it is running a really cool custom shell of Windows-ish kind of shell. It's got a full screen Xbox experience, which is where the Xbox in the name comes from. And this collaboration with Microsoft did allow for ASUS to access a game launcher that is pretty good, but it really is just a launcher for your launchers. It's a double launcher, but it does keep you from having to go to the desktop very often. I say very often because when I first started up, immediately I had to go to the desktop. When turning on the handheld for the first time, you are effectively in a loop of having to update things. And unfortunately, unless you go to the desktop, you're not even going to be able to really update everything properly. It is tedious. It is a little bit time consuming, but once it's set up, I've never had to go back to the desktop, which is kind of cool. Granted, there are some weird quirks. For one, capturing gameplay on this required me to disable copyright protection. Why that was enabled by default is beyond me. I've never had that turn itself on the PC, and I can tell you for a fact that it's not on this one, because guess what? I use two PCs to record these videos. So very weird. I ran it through the capture card the same way I run everything else, and I had to like literally turn off the copyright protection feature, which is, yeah, it's something. Windows also had to do a bunch of updates. ASUS had to do a bunch of updates, and then it took like 3 hours, but once it was done, I had a gaming handheld ready to go. Actually, no, I had to install Steam, Epic Game Store, and download games. But then I was ready to go. Okay, I may be hamming up the inconvenience of having to do all of that. But in general, this has been a touch point on the Steam Deck and the original Ally when I looked at those. Setup is part of the process. And if you don't know how to set up a PC, you're not going to do very well at setting up one of these handhelds. That being said, I've been able to run entirely in the full screen experience, which is great because that full screen experience is actually kind of cool. It's got a bunch of controller shortcuts built into it. It only really broke like twice in my entire time playing with it, which is not bad. And it makes it easier to access your games, buy games from the Microsoft Store, or launch into Steam or Epic Game Store, all without having to plug in an external device. Speaking of plugging in external devices, you might want to use this one as a computer. So what do you need to do that? Well, there is a dock that Asus does sell, and it's a little pricey. I think it was like $90. But it comes with a bunch of USB ports, Ethernet ports, etc. A bunch of good stuff to actually make it actually worth your time to use. But you are going to be limited to the power of the handheld on what you can output to. So if you're plugging into a 4K display, be aware that you're probably not going to be gaming at 4K. You might be able to output to 4K, but it's going to be using some trickery to get there. Speaking of games, that is what this device is for. So let's actually kind of touch base on that. So gameplay wise, I played ukulele on there. Sonic All-Star Racing. Wait, no, it's not All-Star Racing. It's Sonic, the most recent Sonic racing game. The one that supposedly is as good as Mario Kart World. That one. I played that. And I played my usual gacha games. I did try to run things like, Forza. I ran Forza on it just fine. So it works pretty well with a lot of higher end games and medium games. And the fact that you can play Genshin Impact on it is pretty nice. Granted, I heard a rumor that they're going to be adding Genshin Impact to Steam, and that actually works, by the way, on the Steam Deck. I just never did a video about that because I didn't know if it was against Hoyo's TOS. So I didn't do it. But yeah, you can actually run those on Linux just fine. Digressing, you got the benefit of Windows, and Windows allows you to play everything that runs on Windows. So you want to play, I was going to say Hollow Knight. Yeah, actually, you want to play Hollow Knight or Silksong, you got that. Expedition 33, boom, you got that. Fortnite, you can play Fortnite on this thing. You've got it. It's all right there. It all works. And that is cool. That is probably the biggest reason to get a Windows handheld versus the Steam Deck. Performance-wise, this thing is rock solid. When plugged in, it can handle pretty good AAA gaming, like Cyberpunk 2077 looked pretty damn good on this thing. I'm getting consistent 60 FPS in the Hoyo games, which isn't a given in a handheld device. And honestly, with the details cranked and the 1080p screen going, it's doing great. The screen does go up to 120 Hertz, but in handheld mode on battery, it defaults to 60 as a limit. You can override that limit, but that will decrease battery life. Battery life on this thing is actually interesting as well, because while it isn't perfect, it is good enough. In fact, it's very comparable to the Switch 2. Off wall, I'm able to get roughly 4-ish hours without having to plug it in directly. And that is while playing a game at medium detail. I think a good example is I was playing Genshin Impact for a couple hours on, it just worked just fine. Didn't even get a low battery indicator. Or the Sonic Racing game, played that just fine off the wall. So in reality, it performs very, very well when not plugged in. And that's partially due to the improvements of the Z2 Extreme and partially due to a good battery that Asus put into this thing. Comfort-wise, this thing is also in a league of its own, which is really, really cool. The specific grip is actually really, really comfortable to hold. And so you might actually want to use it in handheld mode as opposed to docked or even plugged into the wall. It does dock pretty well as opposed to the previous systems, where I no longer have those weird audio issues and connection issues and running it through capture card issues that I did previously. So overall, it actually improved in just about every metric as opposed to the original generation, in the sense that it is closer to a Nintendo Switch in the way that it can perform. And thanks to some of the trickery that Microsoft did, it is a lot more viable to use in that configuration. That being said, it is not perfect. I still have a mouse plugged into the back of the dock because every once in a while you just happen to need one for a game that just won't launch with the controller or for some weird quirk of the OS. Now, I do think that the upcoming Steam controller will be able to overcome that and might actually be the thing that makes it so that Windows gaming handhelds will be perfect in the living room. But that is also going to come with the Steam machines, which will have a different value proposition altogether because you'll have the Steam machines and your Steam Decks, and you could stop a game on your Steam Deck and pick it up on your Steam machine, which is, I think, the way that Valve's going to go about that. Digressing, The idea of actually having one device that can be moved around and used in different configurations is part of the reason why I like the Switch so much. And in truth, it's kind of why I actually really like the Xbox Ally X. As you can see, I'm very positive about this thing. And that's because as of right now, it is the best example of a Windows gaming handheld, and it just works, which is a lot more than I could say about previous iterations. It's come a long way into making Windows gaming handhelds something that I can recommend to some more technically inclined people. But if you are a console gamer, it might have some of a barrier. Like, I often undersell how much tech I know. It's probably because I'm used to talking to you guys. And you guys are a very tech savvy audience. You know a little bit more than most. So I can talk to you in a way that I can't talk to most people. And when you boil down how wide gaming has become, it becomes very difficult to recommend something like the Xbox Ally X to, say, a coworker who might be into gaming, but isn't able to troubleshoot basic issues with their computer. And they call me over frequently just to help them get out of the trap that they had somehow got themselves into. And when I think about that, and I think about whether to hand someone a Switch 2 or this, I would hand them the Switch 2. I'd hand a kid a Switch 2. I would hand someone who's less technically inclined a Switch 2. New gamers a Switch 2. But if you are a PC gamer, you've built your gaming PC and you really just want something to play those games on the go, this is that device right now. There are going to be better devices in the future. In fact, right now, Aya is working on an actual Strix Halo one that will outperform this, but it's coming at the cost of needing liquid cooling and a massive external battery just to power it. So I don't think that that's really an option. And I think that this is kind of a nice middle ground. It is an actually portable-ish handheld device. Comes with every accessory that you could possibly need for it, made by Asus. There's now a dock. There's the case, which I got both of those, by the way. And overall, it's a very good experience that emulates something first party without truly being first party. That being said, calling this an Xbox is a dangerous move by Microsoft. And not because it's not running Xbox. It is, it's just not running Xbox. It doesn't use the same OS that the current Xbox Series X or S do. It runs Windows with an Xbox app on it. And unfortunately, if that's the direction that Microsoft is going with the next Xbox, they're building a PC. They're just building a computer. Granted, they are the prominent operating system for computers, so okay, I guess I can see it. But what I do kind of disagree with is they're taking the ease of use out of the Xbox and then making it more complicated. And I don't think that that's going to help them sell Xboxes. It's going to help them sell computers. But do we need them to? It's like, SteamOS is already working on making the Steam Cube, the Gabe Cube, right? And they're stripping down Steam to the point that it's easier for the average person to use. And Microsoft is putting more computer, possibly, into the next Xbox. Like, calling this handheld an Xbox and setting that as the expectation means that they're setting us up for a future where the only people who own Xboxes are people who like computers and modify computers and do stuff like that. And so it's just difficult, right? Now, what is cool is one library for everything. Steam sales are great. Free games on Epic Store are great. Microsoft's store exists. But when it comes down to it, is it any easier to do all of that on here than the Steam Deck? The answer is no. In fact, I think the Steam Deck's a little bit better integrated because opening up the desktop on a Steam Deck isn't a requirement, it's an option. As we're here, just getting it started required me to enter the desktop. I think that when we compare we'll consider them the three pillars of handheld gaming right now. Actually, I want to say four. We're going to say four pillars. You've got your Nintendo Switch, which is the big dog and currently the best seller. You've got Steam Deck, which I'm going to consider its own pillar because realistically, Valve's trying to make it its own pillar. You got your Windows handhelds. They're the most complicated, but have the most options when it comes to how to play, what you can play, etc. And you got Android. And the Android handhelds are picking up steam. They're actually getting Steam games on them. I've been seeing things from Wolfden that are pretty cool. He's like able to get some Steam games working on Android handhelds. And as that space improves, it's only going to make the current Windows handheld gaming space more constrained because they're bigger, heavier, and while they can do more, they're really, really expensive. And that's kind of also one of the problems with this device is the cost. You see, right now, this device costs $1,000. And it's a lot of money for a device that can only slightly run games better than a Switch 2 and can run games at a higher resolution than a Steam Deck. If you want to have your PC games, most of them are going to be on Steam anyway. And as I mentioned earlier, if you want to play like Genshin and Honkai Star Rail and ZZZ, there's already rumors that at least one of those is coming to Steam. And I would think that the others will too. Star Rail is tricky. It's the only one that I couldn't get running on the Steam Deck when I tested. But digressing, it's only a matter of time before the Steam Deck can do a lot of what the current Xbox Ally X can. Things that won't make it over there are things like Fortnite. Fortnite is going to stay on Windows, and that's less to do with compatibility and more to do with Epic wanting to distinguish themselves from Steam and has the requirement of needing to, well, connect to the Epic Game Store, which doesn't work properly on the Steam Deck. So regardless, like there will still be benefits to a Windows handheld, but the price is what's going to kill it. Like that $1,000 is a lot to ask for. For that $1,000, you can get a Switch 2 and a Steam Deck. Meaning I can cover pretty much all portable gaming that I could need in the same cost as the one device, and that one device isn't able to replace my Switch 2. Just for full transparency, I have played my Switch 2 still more than I've played the Xbox Ally X. And it isn't that I'm not playing the Xbox Ally X, I'm actually playing it quite regularly. But I'm playing the Nintendo exclusives. I'm playing third-party games on the Switch 2 that I never thought I'd be playing. Like Final Fantasy. It works great on here. And that actually kind of brings me to a weird point. There are still games that work better on the Switch 2 than the Xbox Ally X. I didn't expect that at all. The processor on the Xbox Ally X is so much stronger. The GPU is pretty damn good. But what happens when you've got AMD versus NVIDIA is that NVIDIA features tend to make AMD GPUs not work as well. And so in the case of, say, the Xbox Ally X, where it has an AMD GPU, games that rely on NVIDIA's RTX, well, they just work a little bit better on the Switch too. So Star Wars Outlaws and the current Final Fantasy port is actually kind of crazy on there. I haven't been able to test them side by side because I don't have that on PC yet, but I was able to test Star Wars Outlaws, and I found that Star Wars Outlaws worked really well on the Switch 2 and didn't work as well on the gaming handhelds. I might do some retesting though, see if I can turn off ray tracing and maybe make it work and make it look the same. I don't know. There's still so much to do when testing these back and forth. And I've been working on videos related to that. Where things get funky is Cyberpunk. Like Cyberpunk, technically, I think I can make it look better on the Xbox Ally X and run better on the Xbox Ally X. But it does take a little bit of work to do. And unfortunately, that kind of like is the problem, right? You have to know what you're doing with a Windows gaming handheld. You don't really have to know what you're doing for a Switch 2. I know that this is a bit of a heavy topic because a lot of people really, really, really are rooting for PC gaming handhelds and let's say the Steam Deck to eventually usurp and uproot the entire market. Leading into the Switch 2, there were lots of people really talking about how just buy a Steam Deck, just buy a Steam Deck. And unfortunately, as much as that seems like good advice on the surface, There are people you can and can't give a Steam Deck to, and the same thing goes for this. It's someone who has to be technical enough to be able to fix their own problems. That's the kind of person who should be getting these kinds of devices. If you have to explain a Linux ISO, they're probably not ready for a Steam Deck, to be honest. If they're compatibility letters, wine, etc. Yeah, it makes it easier, but let's be honest. The Steam Deck, as good as it is, and it is getting better and easier to use, there's still quirks to it. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Valve actually does. Since they're releasing the console-fied version of the Steam Deck for living room PCs, I'm really hoping that a lot of the weird quirks have been worked out and that they got it fixed on the software side and that it's good. And I'm planning on getting it once it comes out, but I also acknowledge that I am a different kind of gamer than most. Like, I have a lot of devices to play video games. I'm wearing a $1,000 VR headset, a $1,200 VR headset right now. Like, I'm a very different person to the average person who would be looking at these things. And if you are looking at, say, a Steam Deck versus a Switch 2 versus this, it's like they're not really comparable because it's apples to oranges to bananas, but like the Switch 2 is the most universal to most people. And that is something that I think was lost in a lot of the discussion. And right now the sales data shows that. And it's one of those things where the Switch 2 has outsold the entire PC handheld market, including Steam Deck. It has outsold the Wii U. It has outsold the original Switch in its first year. And it's actually approaching a point that is so astronomically high. Like, they're going to be approaching 20 million units in just 1 year. That goes to show you just how much market share, how much power Nintendo still has. And I think that comparing this to the Switch 2 is doing a disservice to this, because what this is the best of the best for Windows gaming handhelds, software-wise. Processor-wise, it's strong. Like, it is the best overall package right now. Lenovo is making, I think, faster gaming handhelds, but they don't have the Xbox overlay. And so what's really happening is something really cool on PC side is we're getting better controller support, better overall performance that will make things like the next time I have to build a desktop PC for the living room, it could make that better. And that's the discussion we should be having, not whether or not this is better than the Switch 2 or better than the Steam Deck, because they're all kind of becoming their own thing. And I do think that the Steam Deck will eventually stand on its own. Granted, it's more fair to compare the Xbox LIX and the Steam Deck. They're much closer related in DNA. So yeah, it's a weird thing, right? It's hard to recommend this device because it's expensive and because it's not a console. It's just not that grab and go device that most people would want. It is something entirely different. And because of that, I feel that we should treat it different. That is worth it to me. But if it's not worth it to you, I mean, it makes perfect sense. Wait for it to go on sale. I'm going to be honest, this thing's probably going to drop in price. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the year, we see it around 800. That is if the rand shortage ever resolves itself. But that's where I'm going to end it today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, consider giving it a like, maybe comment, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Wolfy, out.